Yo, what up, everybody? It's your boy Carson Fox, and thanks for tuning in for another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. And I got to be upfront, first and foremost, I'm dealing with a bit of a cold right now, so if I feel a little more hoarse or I cough or have to take a sip of water, so I'm trying to battle through this. And the reason why I even want to do this while being a little bit of sick is there's awesome news in the world of college football. Leading it off, announced today that Nico Marchiol has recommitted to West Virginia through a commitment to Country Roads Trust for the 2024 season. West Virginia not only has its backup quarterback for 2024 behind Garrett Green, and whether you want to consider him really a true backup, but more so, I feel like the 1B to the 1A of the quarterback that is Garrett Green. Yes, he's going to be the starter, obviously, but as we saw, Nicco Marchiol played a pivotal role in pivotal moments in this season, namely the 2023 Backyard Brawl and the win the following week against Texas Tech, and was more than just like an insurance policy. He was an important piece of this 2023 team for certain and played a role in the story. So he'll be back again for 2024 in the same kind of a role, but leaves a wide open door for him to take the reins in 2025, and he has eligibility because he preserved his red shirt last year to be the starter once again in 2026 if he doesn't head off to the NFL draft or something, or heaven by heavens, hopefully doesn't hit the transfer portal at that point in time. But I mean, I just think it's an awesome thing to have Nicco Marchiol, not only just because of the person he is, and all that he does in the WVU community and Morgantown. And like, I just totally do get this vibe, that his family's bought in. I sense, do I dare say it, the word loyalty in today's world of college football, that I just think he's the highest rated high school quarterback prospect that West Virginia's had since Geno Smith. And if it wasn't walking into this circumstance in which Garrett Green had such this is not to take away at all from Garrett Green for 2023. It's just, if Garrett Green wouldn't have lit the world on fire in the way that he did with, his rushing ability, fitting Neal Brown's scheme so well, the big time throw statistics, like Garrett Green had a good 2023 season, Nicco Marchiol would be the quarterback for 2024. So him committing to holding a clipboard for one more season is absolutely huge in today's world of college football, where so many players, if they're not starting by their third year in college football, are leaving. They're finding somewhere else. And like, obviously, Nico could have tested the waters if he really wanted to see what his options were open. Never hit the transfer portal throughout this month of December into January. So if he was going to do that, it would have, held him out of spring camp from other teams that he could have potentially chosen. But I just think this is huge. I can't wait for Nico's time. Can't thank him enough for wanting to, recommit to come back for 2024. And this just propels this 2024 team and can make it such a special season by him coming back. So huge news. Feels like it's December 25th all over again by Nicco Marchiol recommitting and coming back for the 2024 season. And I can't believe I made this video, and I've been talking about this, I feel like, for months. And the day after I make the video last week, what do you know? It's semi-announced. It didn't really seem like it was across all of the West Virginia media outlets, but if you follow Rivals Keenan Cummings, there was an article that dropped a week ago that said that West Virginia is changing to a 3-4 defense in 2024. And a quote that he used from Neal Brown, that this is what I want to talk about to kind of start out today's show beyond the Marchiol news, is that I found this line interesting. Neal Brown said, quote, "That's really what we've been all year. We've been a 3-4 defense. That's what we want to continue to be moving forward. I think it's a better fit." Now, end quote. I agree with Neal Brown on the desire of this statement, but the premise is wrong. This wasn't true that West Virginia was what the public and fans, media alike, know as a true 3-4 defense. And you look at the snap counts and rivals. Again, mention a name drop again. Keenan Cummings does a great job on posting this week in and week out throughout the season in partnership with Pro Football Focus. Marcus Floyd and Hershey McLaurin over the final 3-4 games of the season were being used as linebackers, but they're safeties. Like, let's just be honest. If you throw a safety, and I know like it's a little bit more drastic of going from like a safety to the defensive line, but a guy who's 6 foot, 200 pounds in Floyd and 6'1", 205 pounds in McLaurin, those guys aren't prototypical linebackers. They're undersized for sure. At that position. And again, I know that this was due because of the injuries and lack of depth that was being created because of the injury to Trey Lathan, Josiah Trotter from last spring, Jai Favaris, Tyrick Austin Cave. We never saw him all season, and Tara Simmons isn't used for anything more than special teams on this team. So they of course obviously wanted to get both of those guys, McLaurin and Floyd, onto the field. They were playmakers. So to get them onto the field, even though kind of out of position, like that's what Brown was doing. But no, that's not a base 3-4 defense. Being, here in southwestern Pennsylvania and, being a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers for most of my life, I know what the steel curtain base 3-4 defense with 2 middle linebackers, 2 outside linebackers, and 3 down linemen is like. So what does this actually mean, this quote, these words from Neal Brown and Jordan Leslie? Do we actually see that type of setup from this defense in 2024? Do we see 3 down linemen as we usually have, but 4 true linebackers, just 2 safeties, and 2 corners in WVU's base defense? Now, I know that in today's world of college football, depending upon down and distance and so many other things, so many specialized packages are used, and you see this in the NFL too. So many different dime, nickel, 3-3-5 type defenses are used, but when the first play rolls out at Milan Puskar Stadium on August 31st, will there be 2 safeties, 4 linebackers, 2 corners, and 3 down linemen trotting out onto the field? If Penn State decides to receive the opening kickoffs, like that's what I want to know. And then do they roll with that for the entire 2024 season? Because I think that's what it's needed. We need a schematic change, a philosophy change, doing some things different. Because just for the past, even into 2021, 2020 was a great defensive year. And then 2021 was a bit of a regression, and you thought that was because of the losses of Tyke Smith and Drashawn Miller and so many and Nick Troy Fortune and so many others. But it's been a bit of a steady decline in some key areas, and not getting into, say, the top 50 in the country. I look at average points per game. West Virginia gave up this season 26.15. So you can't give up, an odd number. So let's round down to 26. To be in the top 45 to 50 scoring defenses in the country, WVU would have to get down to 23 or 24 points per game. In average pass yards allowed per game, West Virginia wasn't even in the top half of FBS defenses. In sacks, tackles for loss, and third down percentage, West Virginia could improve. Because of that awesome 7-sack performance in the bowl game, the numbers look better than they really appeared before the bowl game. But third down percentage, 61st. To give you an example, like Texas, of a team you probably saw a lot of this past college football season, was at second in the country at 26.6%. So look at that, almost a 12 percentage difference, between 61 and second. So just tweaks, just a little bit of tweaks, and I think we found the secret sauce. And I already talked about in previous episodes about interceptions and forced fumbles and how important those are. And it's bringing disguised looks with players from, again, the second level, either safeties or linebackers, and I think they finally have the personnel to go and try this 3-4 base defense out. So I'll hold back, I'll pause there, move forward, because then we'll talk about kind of the way the depth chart is starting to form. I know I talked about that a lot in the last episode, but again, there's still some more transfer movement that's affecting these things. So looking at what's happened with the transfer portal and recruiting of the last week, Jared Bartlett found a destination. I didn't mention him in my last video. I talked a lot about Tamia Durwaje, but I didn't talk about Jared Bartlett. I'm going to hold on him for a second too, but ended up choosing the Cincinnati Bearcats. So moving forward, the newest commit was senior defensive lineman from Troy, T.J. Jackson, and then the second of, I think, 5 visitors that were in Morgantown, 5 or 6, no, 6. 6 visitors that were in Morgantown over the weekend. So the commits were T.J. Jackson from Troy, and offensive lineman, a redshirt sophomore, Xavier Bosley from Jacksonville State. So, I mean, Jackson, I think, committed on Friday. So, like, his first day in, he was like, yeah, this is where I'm going. I want to be here. And obviously, there's, a bit of a connection there. Not that he ever played for Neal Brown, but the Troy to West Virginia connection and back and forth now that Dante Wright has officially left to be the new defensive coordinator there. There's a bit of a, Troy, West Virginia connection. They're friendly, let's put it that way. And then Jacksonville State talked about this, or Xavier Bosley from Jacksonville State talked about this last time from Dunbar, West Virginia, posted I'm coming home video and then committed. So great to have him come into the program. Another commit and then decommit all within the matter of about 36 hours was senior safety Taj Rael from Old Dominion. So the news on this is he was offered something that he accepted, committed, and now Miami has come calling and is upping their NIL offer. So he's going for the money, obviously, more so than the place where he plays. I think the same could be said of what was going on with senior safety Jaden Boysen from South Alabama, who apparently turned down visits to, I think, Mississippi State and UCLA. Elsewhere, I might have those schools wrong, but visited and then chose to return back to South Alabama. So I don't understand that one at all. If he didn't like the number that he was going to be given in Morgantown, or didn't want to be a backup potentially to Anthony Wilson or Aubrey Burks, don't get Voisin. Elijah Hills visited, instead chose Wisconsin. I'm wondering if he thought, saw the writing on the wall with Jackson committing first. So he would be relegated to another backup position. Also, after a key piece of the 2024 team, Sean Martin, officially committed to the trust. So you have, and Eddie Vesterinen. So you have both those guys on both sides filling out. It didn't seem really like Hills was a defensive nose tackle, going to be playing one of the end positions. So if he didn't want to come in and compete with Vesterinen or Martin for starting jobs, he's going to go give his shot at Wisconsin, which I can't blame him. Wisconsin having traditionally an awesome offensive and defensive lines throughout the decades, playing for the guy from Cincinnati, old coach, names escapes me at the top of my head here, brain fog. So Wisconsin for Elijah Hills, and then Kobe Singleton, a cornerback from Liberty, ended up choosing Oregon State, who isn't going to be a part of the Power 4 next year, over West Virginia. I'm wondering if once he saw the news about Rael, and West Virginia's already gotten another safety commit from Josh Minkins from Louisville. So did he just not see a spot for him to break into a starting 2 rotation? And I don't think so. So I don't think it's any of these are make or break losses. Maybe Rael, because maybe you would have played things differently with Voisin instead of Rael. To get him committed, and obviously if he was just in it for the money, then he wasn't a good fit for your program to begin with. So But it cost West Virginia a chance at a visit. And those count. That was kind of news to me. That was something I learned this week, that you only have so many official visits than you can offer to recruits. I didn't know that the school can't offer an unlimited number of official visits. Why? I don't know why that is, but anyway, what do you think? Love to hear your comments on that. Why do schools have official visits and a cap on official visits? Why can't you have more? So Martin committed. That was huge. Aubrey Burks, that was huge. Marchiol today. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. I feel like it's down to like Anthony Wilson and CJ Donaldson are the only two players left that Country Roads Trust needs to secure for this 2024 roster to be totally intact, ready and locked and loaded without any question marks. From my indispensables list, if you go back about 5 or 6 shows to go back and see that that list. So Jackson, and my curiosity with him is the fit. Does the staff see him as a defensive end or a nose tackle at about 6'2", 300 pounds? My best guess is initially he'll push both Eddie Vesterinen and Sean Martin at the defensive end positions while rotating with them in on the line. But I think he's flexible enough to try and play both. So the coaching staff, Andrew Jackson, the defensive line coach, may try and use him in different positions to try and rotate in and see who's his best 3. So, depending upon what the look that they want to give opposing offenses. So, I think we're going to see a lot of TJ Jackson this season. I think like he's, and the way that that West Virginia has rotated its defensive linemen throughout the last 3-4 years and playing upwards of like 9-10 guys on the defensive line, trying to keep them fresh for the fourth quarter, trying to, swap guys in and out and get them some snaps here and there. Like, this was a quality ad. I'm glad that West Virginia got him, and he wants to, clearly wants to be a Mountaineer. So glad to have him part of the team. And then Xavier Bosley, I think, like, I'm not one necessarily to say like, oh wow, he's just going to slide right in and be the starter at right tackle. And I talked about this, I think on my last video, was I think it's going to just come down to a battle in both the spring and then summer camp as to who gets the starting job between him and Nick Malone. So, your teammates, but I think there will be some competition, some friendly competition between the two of those guys, both West Virginia, like, in-state kids. Malone being there, coming up as a walk-on and played in like kind of a spot starting role when Doug Nestor's gone down with injury. So this is his time. This is his moment as like a 6th-year college guy to start, but coming up against an up-and-comer who is an FCS freshman All-American. So, and like there are some other guys who are chomping at the bit to get those starting starting reps as well, or even in the second string and rotate in where possibly needed at any given time. So awesome to have him a part of the staff or team. I think quality adds at both positions. So kind of like I said, now filling out, it seems like with this 2 deep. Don't need to talk about J.J. Jones. It seems like out of North Carolina. I mean, I don't know if he goes through spring camp with the Tar Heels, doesn't like Max Johnson and I already forget his name already, the quarterback who played in the bowl game for the Tar Heels. Like maybe he reconsiders it to come back and play with Garrett Green. If maybe hits the transfer portal after spring, who knows? But for right now, we have Green and now Marchiol at both quarterbacks. Donaldson's the one hookup, like holdout, I guess you could say, at running back and alongside Jaheim White. At wide receiver, your X, your H, and your Z at X. Jaden Bray, who just signed today, Preston Fox, E.J. Horton. Now, again, these could be shifted. These could be played around with however you see them. But, 3 deep. So you're 9 deep at wide receiver. Wow. That's a lot. Are these guys going to want to, will we see more portal departures? Is there going to be enough ball to go around with, hungry mouths to feed? Traylon Ray at the H, backing him up, Jarrell Williams, and then the true freshman, Brandon Raymond, and then the Z receiver, Hudson Clement, who I think, still has to, I don't know if he's going to be offered NIL money, after going from a walk-on to a scholarship player into next season. But Hudson Clement at the Z receiver, Rodney Gallagher, and Day Farmer, the other true freshman 4-star wide receiver. So they're 9 deep at the wide receiver position right there. So I don't think J.J. Jones is necessarily needed, especially at the dollar amount that he would potentially cost Country Roads Trust. So then tight end, you're 2 deep, Cole Taylor, Traylon Davis across the line. Your starting 5's pretty much set. You got Wyatt Milam, Tomas Rimac, Brandon Yates at center, Rimac at left guard, right guard, Jaquay Hubbard. Your right tackle, as I just said, is going to be a battle between Nick Malone or Xavier Bosley. Backing up Milam at left tackle, Johnny Williams, as he did as a true freshman this past year. I think at left guard is swing guard, left or right guard, depending upon injuries, is Sullivan Weidman, who played well in his opportunities this year. I think it's going to be a battle, and this could be a potential transfer to portal departure in Landon Livingston, third-year center, or Kyle Altuner, who's a true freshman center who was blowing up 4- and 5-star recruits left and right during his time at the Under Armour Challenge game, whatever All-American game in practices. So does Livingston see the writing on the wall that this Altuner kid, after a year of Brandon Yates starting as a 6th-year center, does he try and find somewhere elsewhere, maybe back in state to Indiana or Purdue, and Altuner, being your guy as your backup? So I don't know. On the defensive side of the ball, you're really going 3 deep. Your 2 deep's looking better by the day, but your 3 deep feeling really good about. Your 2 defensive ends, Investorinen, Martin. The nose tackle, I think, is going to be a rotation between Mulba, Hammond Russell, and Corey McIntyre, depending upon how he comes along in spring camp in the summer. Backing up Vestorinen and Martin is going to be TJ Jackson on either side. But do we see a guy like Zyke Lawton finally, as a 4th-year player, break into that 2 deep? Asani Redwood had made some really solid strides, especially in that bowl game. So then moving on to the linebacking core, this is where it's interesting. So if West Virginia truly does go to a base 3-4 defense with 4 linebackers, you're looking at a Sam linebacker on the strong side, a Mike linebacker in the middle, a Jack linebacker, who's more of a speed rusher. Think you're, again, with my Steelers example, think about a James Harrison type. So Tyron Bradley on one side, Ty French on the other side at your Sam and your Jack make a lot of sense to me. And then in the middle, some sort of combination between either Reed Carrico or Josiah Trotter on one side and Trey Lathan or Ben Cutter on the other side. And I really, really like that amongst those 6 linebackers. So that's why I think you got 6 to play 4. And you have some ability to maybe flip-flop. Like, I think there's a wide open opportunity then, excuse me, at that backup Jack linebacker spot by one of these true freshmen. And you can go back to my National Signing Day video to kind of hear a recap on that. But Ben Onwuka or Mekhi Byerson, Elijah Kinsler, or even a guy who was on this past year's team as a true freshman, but redshirted, Orion Fisher, who I still think is just a project player. I don't understand why, like a 6'7", 205 basketball player being recruited. Like, I don't know where he's going to play, but who knows if he competes this spring. Like that backup Jack linebacker pass rusher, like there might be an opportunity for a true freshman there. So and then in the safeties, that kind of solidifies the Anthony Wilson at strong safety, Spears safety, and then the free safety, Aubrey Burks, would be, his 3rd consecutive year starting for this team. So then in the backups, Minkins, could he play both from Louisville? That's why I'm not really so heartbroken about the Rael decision to decommit. So Raleigh Collins kind of moves up into that backup role at safety, with Aiden Tagovailoa Nelson being a 3rd stringer and developing. So then at the corners, we've already talked about this enough. I think it's a 4-man race for 2 spots. Montre Miller from Kent State, I think, probably is the leader of the pack amongst the four for one of the two cornerback positions, and then it's some sort of combination between Jacoby Spells, Aiden Garnes, the transfer in from Duquesne, and T.J. Crandall, the transfer in from Colorado State, with the two of the four of that three for that one spot being the backups on either side. So love this. I love how this roster is coming together. I love the two deep. And again, once you get Donaldson and Wilson definitely plugged in with Country Roads Trust, there's no questions asked. Like, we can move forward, and I feel really good about this two deep committed for 2024. So what that means is, yes, there will be some movement from some of these third and fourth string guys at some positions to trim the fat, as they say, down from 91 scholarships to 85. So we'll see what happens on that note of what's still going to happen. So I want to transition from talking about what I've talked about a lot, I feel like, over my last two videos. And I kind of want to go outside the lines spanning football. And it's just something I've seen a lot of over the course of definitely the last 3 years, with the transfer portal becoming this beast, this new thing. But I'm very cynical now of the popular phrase, once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer. And like, I hate saying that, because at its core, its deeper meaning is so good and so positive, and it rings true to everybody in the state of West Virginia and Mountaineer Nation at large, because it's like, an endearing phrase along the same kinds of lines as, you can take the girl out of blank, but you can't take the blank out of a girl. So wherever you go, however you are, or, whoever you are, you're still going to be remembered in West Virginia and appreciated, no matter, again, you could go to China, you could go to Australia, those memories, the culture, the people, the lessons learned, everything about West Virginia will make an imprint on your life, and you will carry that flying WV and the old gold and blue colors wherever you go, because Mountaineer Nation is proud of you, appreciates you, loves you in a way that we, West Virginia Nation, can really only describe. It's just a different kind of feel and family that feels like. And that's the saying, once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer. So Pat White and his journeys throughout the years, all over the country, being a coach and this, that, and the other thing, once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer if he ever returned. Or everybody's story is different, and it spans the test of time, because it just seems like, everywhere in the Rust Belt states is people leave. People, go live somewhere else. I mean, look at the contingency that's been built up in the Carolina states now of people who used to live in the state of West Virginia and now live elsewhere. So, Mountaineer Nation is just not between, the mountain state. It's all across the world, and I've seen that logo and those colors everywhere, and you say go Mountaineers whenever you say hi to each other. So, but we have so many cases, I feel like, of players who leave for right or wrong reasons, who have now basically watered this down into one that doesn't mean as much as it did even just 5 years ago. And I think Jared Bartlett is just a great case example of a guy who stayed with this program for 5 years, started multiple years, got his degree, never had any off-the-field issues. But now West Virginia has a guy in a caliber of Tyron Bradley who's better than Jared Bartlett in his 6th year. And Bartlett's not an NFL caliber player, so with one more year of eligibility, to not only obtain his master's degree, but also get paid one more year in NIL dollars, why the heck, wouldn't you, in his case, want to take advantage of it and live the college life for one more year? So, wherever he went, you shouldn't chastise him of all people for going and doing this thing. I know choosing Cincinnati, West Virginia's owned them in the series, but kind of a geographical rival to a certain extent. Flip that on its other side to a guy like Tamia Durage, who very well could be the first non-COVID era D1 player, who's especially not non-quarterback, to play at 5 different schools in 5 years. After now choosing to move on to Florida State, who just brought, over-recruited over top of him, still chooses the Seminoles. So, he's going to go there, not play next year, and he'll probably be looking for school number 4. So, and I think it just gives more and more credence to the emerging term that I'm hearing a lot all over the place in the media and elsewhere, being called these mercenary players. So, Rael, mercenary player. Tamia Durage, mercenary player. These guys who are just basically one-and-done guys trying to cash in on their quickest buck in NIL dollars, and that's what they play for. So, we if we're gonna look, well, I guess I'll just keep going through my points. So, are we gonna claim mercenary players as West Virginia's own, for moving forward? I mean, thankfully, turned out great in one-year situations. I'll give you recent examples like Beanie Bishop or Tony Fields. But what about guys who are, these are 2-year examples, but what about a guy like Will Grier or even Jeff Hostetler, who played at Penn State for 2 years and then came to West Virginia, or Grier, Florida to West Virginia. So, do they get the once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer tag? Or what about guys who did see greener pastures? I know there are a few, but did see greener pastures elsewhere and spat WVU in the face in the process of leaving. Jalen Bridges going to Baylor, Tyke Smith going to Georgia, Oscar Shibwe going to Kentucky. I'll give you another example, Austin Davis, a guy who was one of the premier playmaker stars who would have contributed well for this West Virginia team that shared a Big 12 title last year, but instead preseason ended up going to TCU and went to the College Baseball World Series. So, what about a guy like that? Or maybe you have a case point example of a guy like Sagaba Konate in basketball who clearly didn't want to risk injuring himself even when he was medically cleared to play and sat the bench for the whole half of the season, wanting to show NBA scouts that he could shoot 3-pointers, then basically opted out for the rest of the season after the backyard brawl of his last year. Or what about a guy like Branko Busick? And you'll say to yourself, who the heck is that, Carson? Who? Branko Busick. Highly rated 3-star linebacker recruit back in 2010 out of Steubenville, Ohio, who was arrested twice in the matter of 96 hours for 2 armed home invasions in the summer of 2011 and was dismissed from the team, later finishing his football career at Division II, California University of Pennsylvania. Or I'll throw another name at you that's deep in the annals of history. Tyree Owens, a 3-star defensive lineman from Oviedo, Florida, who got in a tussle and stabbed outside of Lux nightclub in downtown Morgantown in September of 2015 and was dismissed for a violation of team rules. You don't know the full story other than the folks who were there and probably the team, but never knew what happened to old Tyree. So you're getting my point here. While the words themselves are just words, you're going to have this, either have to have this blanketed inclusive phrase, and you're going to have bad eggs in the bunch. Does once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer only apply to the select chosen few? Your Pat Whites or your Owen Schmitz or your WVU legends? If so, I'm fine with that. It just rings hollower than it once did, and I'm using it fewer and fewer times, especially as it pertains to football, basketball, baseball players now with the evolution of the transfer portal. So I don't know. How do you feel about the once a Mountaineer, always a Mountaineer phrase? Does it annoy you? Do you like it? Do you see what I'm saying about it potentially being tainted? It seems like you have all these types of case examples, excuse me, good and bad, that you got to be selective on who you give it to. I don't know. So last couple things I could say, with it being the national championship game this past Monday, comes your final polls for the season, and something that we talked about heading into the Mayo Bowl was, could West Virginia potentially end the season ranked? Well, in one of the two polls, they were. In the final AP poll, they were not. They were, I think, 27th. In the final coaches poll, West Virginia was 25th. So, yay. Love seeing that for the first time in the tenure of head coach Neal Brown at West Virginia. West Virginia ends the season ranked, or is just period ranked. Again, in the coaches poll, not the AP poll, but get that 25th ranking. So, looking ahead then, already you see you're across so many different outlets on Tuesday and Wednesday, the way too early 2024 predictions and rankings and so on and so forth. And I only really found two guys. I found two guys who have ranked West Virginia for those 2024 way too early rankings. They have a Stuart Mandel from The Athletic, ranked West Virginia 25th, and then Brett McMurphy from Action Network, also 25th. A guy like Chris Vanini had West Virginia, wait a second, maybe that would have been Chris Vanini's was the final for 2023, but had West Virginia 30th to end 2023, so I don't know if he's ranking West Virginia in the top 25 for 2024, but Mark Schleybaugh at ESPN, no. Paul Meyerberg and Eric Smith from USA Today, no. Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus, no. Jay Brady McCullough from Yahoo Sports, no. Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports, no. Bill Bender, The Sporting News, no. Josh Reuter, Bleacher Report, no. So, the disrespect continues for West Virginia, and that has got to be motivation. As I've said a number of times, and will always say this, West Virginia is a better David than it is as a Goliath. Better to be on the outside looking in and to prove everybody wrong during the process. So I know, and I want this too. I want a ranked matchup come August 31st against Penn State and Morgantown. Who knows? You could bring College Game Day to it. I know there's probably got some other really good Week 1 games, but that would be great to have. To kick off the season as a ranked matchup between the Nittany Lions and the Mountaineers, and would just give credence that West Virginia's on the right track. But I'm fine. I'm fine with the disrespect. Let's bring it on. Let's take it. And again, I hope it motivates these players, pushes them throughout the spring, pushes them throughout the summer. And as I said many videos ago, it's got to now go from the mantra being trust the climb to make the ascension, compete, get to the top of the Big 12 conference. And that's why I'm so on edge still, and won't say one way or another, any sort of expectations, anything just yet, until I see West Virginia's 2024 schedule. Because looking at a lot of those articles, and I gave you a long list that I looked through to see if West Virginia was in, I see 5 opponents that these writers are ranking preseason that are on West Virginia's schedule. Penn State, Arizona, the Kansas schools, and Oklahoma State. So, and at Texas Tech is always trouble for Neal Brown and the boys. Finally got that monkey off their back this past year, beating them in Morgantown, and then going on the road. What's their other road? Arizona's going to be tough. Cincinnati was the easy one. I think they can win. I'd have to take a look at it, but Texas Tech, always a tough battle in conference for 2024. So one of the last, I want to talk about 2 more things, and I'll conclude this show, hopefully early. The news today, West Virginia, what do you call it? Born in West Virginia, the GOAT, as many like to call him, the greatest of all time, head coach in college football, Nick Saban, officially retired last night. So leaving the head coaching position at the University of Alabama vacant. And man, I just think about it. I look it up his Wikipedia page, kind of just to follow his trajectory of his coaching stops and where he went in between. And it's just unfortunate, I think, that a guy born and raised in Fairmont, West Virginia, didn't play for the Mountaineers, but obviously had an affinity for them growing up, and then having friends who played for West Virginia, coming back as a GA or defensive backs coach. on the Frank Signetti staff that was back in the late 70s. Married a West Virginia girl. Miss Terry, as everyone she's just almost as famous, it feels like, as him. And who knows how the influence that she had on his decision to retire. But it's just unfortunate that the timing never really worked out for Nick Saban to get here. And I know that he did, yes, win a national title at LSU in the early 2000s. But at that point in time, you were attached to Rich Rodriguez. And when he joined, it's just like the timing never worked, whether it was the transition from Neyland into Rod, and then Rod's rise, and then Rod decides to pass on the Alabama job, and it goes to Saban, and magic just was created in a bottle there. And what do you know? Saban was never leaving Alabama after that, unless it was going to be to retire. Wasn't going back to the NFL. Tried that and didn't work out. And LSU had moved on with Les Miles, and West Virginia would seem to be on the rise with Rich Rodriguez. So it just the timing never worked out at the right points to potentially get Nick Saban into Morgantown and coaching the Mountaineers. So it's just a shame that that could have been a potentially perfect fit some way, somehow. And that was just fun fodder, it seemed like, for so many years, that Nick Saban could potentially leave the Tide and come back to coach the Mountaineers, but no. I guess the last point I'll note is why am I even talking about Nick Saban in this, other than the birth in West Virginia connection, is I think this gives credence to my argument from this past September, now even more so, that West Virginia should cancel the series with Alabama in 2026-2027. The only reason this was even done was because the former athletic director, Shane Lyons, previously working at Alabama, now works at Alabama again, and the connection with Saban. So to make that possible. So Ren Baker has already said about trying to cut West Virginia's schedule down to one Power 5 rivalry opponent, and then a group of 5 team, and then an FCS if West Virginia continues to play 9 conference games. So you don't need Alabama. They bring nothing other than playing one of the blue bloods of college football in the non-conference. It just bring Pitt in. Extend the backyard brawl season, the partnership, 2 more years, or bring in Virginia Tech or Louisville or, I don't care, Miami or Maryland, Syracuse. Somebody who's going to continue that, right? Because as I've said many a times, that rates well on TV, it draws fans, and yes, LSU brought a lot of fans in 2011. I was there. It was a packed house, just like you see in my, my fat head behind me, of a lot of blue and gold, and filled out Milan Puskar Stadium. So, but it's just that's what you need. If West Virginia's going to play this 9 conference schedule in which you don't care about anybody in the Big 12 conference, and you want to play Pitt and you want to play Virginia Tech, these rivals, you got to get them on the schedule. So get Bama off. I would love to see that. Also, that as much as I love this Dukes Mayo connection, but the Dukes Mayo kickoff or whatever it is, I think in 2028 with Tennessee, get those out of there and get these rivals. But who knows? Because it transitions well to my next topic, is that it's NCAA convention. If you're following the articles with Ross Dellinger and so many others who are writing about what's going on with the talk about new NIL guidelines and the new Division I being created, which I talked about in some previous episodes, is West Virginia going to be able to compete at that level in financial compensation, in which direct payments are happening from the schools to the players? Oh boy. So I don't even know why I think about things that are happening in 2026 and beyond, because we might be talking about all of these conferences as we know it, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, blowing up, and there being a whole new Division One with only a select number of players in one division versus another. So I think that this new NCAA president, Charlie Baker, means business. That's why he put it out there, already created it as a bill and said, let's do it sooner rather than later. Want to have it implemented by January of 2025. Oh boy. So it is happening, and happening fast. So I'll try to keep you updated as much as I can with that saga and how it plays in, with West Virginia. And we might talk about that from week to week. But I'm just seeing those articles over the course of yesterday and today. It's like, makes a lot of sense, in addition to how much effort, time and effort that Nick Saban was putting into. I read his quotes today of him saying about how hard he had to work this season, and they weren't where they needed to be at the beginning of the season, so he had to work harder to basically light a fire under the players to get them to play to the best of their ability for the year, and they got all the way to the Final Four. And I think at his age, and he just doesn't want to do that anymore. So it just goes to show, even the greatest college football coach of all time is, in this day and age of college football, it's so hard. It's so hard with the way that the everything is, NIL, transfer portal, roster management. It is so hard to not only get there, but then stay there. So rather than do that, he'd rather kind of sail out on top, getting to the college football playoff, winning the SEC, winning the Iron Bowl, kind of sail off into the sunset. So I hope, and I think I've listened to enough media pundits today who say this, I do hope that Nick Saban stays in the college football world and can serve in some sort of leadership role, because his voice carries weight. People listen to him, and he's usually spot on. So if he can give any oversight to, Charlie Baker and the powers that be as they try and structure, because it makes total sense that this is coming. And again, as I said, this quasi pay-for-play structure through collectives and contributing is just not working. There's donor fatigue everywhere. You can't write these things off as tax write-offs, even though they're technically really donations and charity. It's weird. And I'm surprised that there hasn't been any more scandals than there already was with the Jaden Rashada situation down at Florida, with promising him X, not delivering on it after he signed his letter of intent, and then he ended up breaking it to go to Arizona State. I haven't. How has no one embezzled money out of these collectives? Or I don't know. Maybe not at the Power 5 level, but maybe at some of these other different levels. And then if you step back and really just think about it, is that it just kind of shows where our culture is at today and what we consider at such a high level. And I know this is a West Virginia football channel, so I don't want to give you some philosophical spiel, but it's we're now paying 18 to 22-year-old college football players out of our own pockets as fans so that they'll stay with our teams. It's just nuts when you kind of step back and think about the bigger picture in the grand scheme of life of now what college football has come to. So if there's any way to potentially rein this in, so it's not the wild, wild west, and have some more structure to it, and get back to a place in which NIL was designed in being able to profit off your name, image, and likeness from outside businesses. So a guy like a Todd Gurley can sell his signed trading cards at a convention, or get booster dinner or something like that, and make some money off it. But then the school's making as much money as they do. But I also get that it's a business, and that football and basketball brings in X amount of dollars, and all of the women's sports and some men's Olympic sports bring in here. So to pay them on equal footing, and how do you afford that if you're a Alabama versus a UConn? And I don't like it. There's just so much that needs to be waded through. But like, at least Charlie Baker's going out there and being bold and throwing something out on paper and starting there and say, all right, everybody, let's figure this out. So kudos to him. Get Nick Saban involved. Get some other bright minds in college football involved. He has his connections to getting Congress involved, and who knows, we might see something over the course of the next 12 months. So maybe that also reels in some realignment talk that teams are kind of just waiting and seeing what are the next steps ahead. If I'm the SEC and the Big Ten, I am quivering in my boots right now, because although they're the cash cows of college football and conferences right now, opening up this new division, like, do you leave your like Ohio State doesn't need the Big Ten, Alabama, LSU don't need the SEC. I mean, I think Greg Sankey would beg to differ, or Georgia or someone, like, they want to play and like, because they're still in conferences like teams with, in the SEC's case, Mississippi State and Vanderbilt are in the Big Ten with Indiana and Northwestern and let me throw out another terrible team. Well, I mean, Purdue's not that good. Illinois or something, like, you know what, or Rutgers. Yeah. So it's like these superpowers in their two leagues to potentially join into another super division and get others involved. It's appealing. It could be something. So who knows? Let me know your thoughts. If you like this video, I appreciate you watching. Like it so more people, Mountaineer fans across YouTube, can watch it in other social media. Check out some of my other videos on this channel. See what's happening with roster management and how things are coming together for the development of this team as it transitions from the 2023 to 2024 season. So I'd love to have you as a subscriber, and I'd love to know your thoughts. Where do you think I'm right? Where do you think I'm wrong? Where do you think, I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this upcoming 2024 season and what's going on as we look ahead in college football with all the chaos that has ensued? So thanks for tuning in. I'll be back next week. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. Go Mountaineers. Hail West Virginia.